Welcome everyone to the Build It Better podcast. This is our pilot episode, and I'm so excited because we have so many amazing people to hear today. My name's Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at Lady Leet. Ben Lesh is here, and he is in a great mood today. Hi, Ben.
I'm just sleepy and grumpy. I'm grumpy and sleepy.
Ben,
Detroit even won recently, and you're still grumpy? Like,
dude, you're here.
Feel like you need a new
He's
Detroit
here and
hat.
he's smiling. He's won half the battle already.
I put on makeup for you. That should make you feel so good.
I
didn't put on lashes.
You will not know if that's just a filter, though, because I too am wearing filter makeup.
Are you really?
You don't know,
beautiful.
do you?
You look beautiful, Jesse.
Well, when we did a photo shoot, I did a photo shoot with Jesse, Ben, and I did put filters on him to make him look prettier. So
that's great.
It is needed sometimes. I'm not gonna lie.
It's science. It's technology.
You really brush that up.
I'm not actually even here. This is just a filter, like the whole thing.
Wait, Ben, tell us who you are. You got to introduce yourself.
Oh, let's see. Who am I? I'm Ben. I work on ArcGIS sometimes, and let's see. I've worked 2 out of however many FANG companies there are. Yeah, and I work in web. I've worked on the web for like 20 plus years. Friends with Tracy. She gets me into all sorts of podcast trouble.
Yes, hopefully more trouble and promotions.
Everyone needs a Tracy.
Okay, everyone else too. Who wants to go next?
Hi, I'm Adam Barrett. I'm a senior software engineer at this dot, and I'm a fun-loving guy who likes to talk about stuffs. Nice. So that's why I'm here.
Some serious radio voice. I'm Jesse. You can find me at this ridiculous handle on the Fediverse that I've put up.
What is this Fediverse?
Tomchak at pleroma v2.fly.dev for those of you who are not watching us on video.
That's a mouthful. I'm a software architect at this dot. I enjoy basically doing anything on the web. I'm newer to the web. I started in like mobile development for many, many, many years. So I'm still working on centering divs. But
all right. So here it is. I'm going to say it right now. You know what my problem is with the Fediverse and Mastodon and all this stuff?
Is that the handle is ridiculously long?
No, it's not even that. It's that I work on machines all day and I'm typing code all day and I'm configuring shit all day. And then I get to the point where it's like, all right, so now I've got to sign up for that. So I install it in Mastodon, I get in and it's like, pick a server. And I'm like, nope, I'm out. I'm not doing this. I'm not picking a server. I picked servers earlier today and people paid me for it. I'm not picking servers for you for free, Mastodon. I'm out.
You can just pick Jesse's server.
No one said you had to stand one up yourself. You just
I don't even want to type it in. I'm just like, no.
Ben has a very high high bar for experience, for user experience, and if you do not meet it, you don't earn his.
I mean, it's to the point where work is over, and it's like I could type a URL or I could pour myself a drink. And
yeah. So are you going to talk about architecture today, or are you going to pour yourself a drink?
Are they exclusive? Can you not do both?
You can absolutely do both. What are we going to talk about? Not only today, but on the show in general.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, you could pour yourself 2 drinks instead of doing both, right? Like there's a
trade-off.
I'm the Fediverse.
Yeah.
Okay, but seriously though, architecture. So architecture to me is this thing, and it's like, you know, a lot of developers, they're like, ooh, I'm going to be an architect one day. It's so cool. And like, what is it? And how do I do it? And it seems like to be this like nebulous, like magical thing that nobody can obtain. Right. But y'all do a lot of architecture. So like,
it's a broad set of things, right? Like it's a broad set of things. Like a lot of people have architectures spoon-fed to them and they're quite successful. And other people have to create architecture from scratch, or worse, they need to create architecture from scratch and they don't realize they need to, and they just like kind of haphazardly end up with an architecture.
You talking about your own experience in ArcGIS?
Yeah, oh yeah. Every runs the gamut, but yeah.
I mean, haven't we all spent plenty of time? Isn't that how most of us got here, is blindly building our architecture poorly for many years?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to like break that down. Like what are we defining as architecture, right? Because we've got this like strange construction analogy going on in programming, right? It's like, oh yeah, we're developers and we have architects and builders and all this stuff. But like, what is architecture really? I mean, right? Like when you go, hey mom, I'm an architect, she's impressed. But beyond that, what do you like What are you thinking
And
about
it's
when you say
usually,
architecture?
I mean, I think of it as a means to organize, not just like to organize everything. Like, so you got organization of code, organization of data flow through executing code, you know, organization of things, even so far as like memory management, that sort of stuff. Like, people don't usually dive into that, but like the stuff, for example, like you're building stuff in the browser with the DOM or whatever, like you're building something on a predefined architecture, right? Like, so, and that's running on, you know, native code, which has its own predefined architecture, which is running over, you know, commands and instructions running against a literal CPU architecture. So there's like, there's many, many, many layers to this stuff as it goes on. And it gets to the point where maybe you even have an architecture for a specific component in your app or whatever. But like the important thing is that people think about it and people consider it, or at least have something in place when it comes to that sort of thing. Because it's organization and a plan, and without that, you're kind of hosed, I think. But
I was reading this book, and well, I was Googling on the internet, and it said, this book says, front-end architecture is a collection of tools and processes that aims to improve the quality of front-end code while creating a more efficient and sustainable workflow.
That says a lot without really saying anything, right? Like, it's kind of
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's a bunch of tools and stuff. It's stuff that people do to like maintain stuff. That doesn't really mean much, right? I kind of feel like there's got to be more to it. If you think about the analogy, like I was talking about the builders and the whatever, like you can build a tree house. You can just start building. You can just like nail things together and measure something out. Yeah, it looks about right, whatever. And you can just keep building. And hey, but when you get to like, I'm going to build my house or an apartment building or something, you probably want somebody to be the architect, right? And I mean, what is the architect in that sense? It's somebody who's going to like plan it out. They're not going to build it, but they're going to like deliberately design it in a way they're going to take into account the, you know, what resources do they have, what materials are they going to be able to use, you know, the different things that other people might not know about, like weights and counterweights and blah blah blah. And I think in software it's kind of the same thing. It's like deliberate design as opposed to just coding and figuring it out. And I agree with you, Ben, that there's sort of like this microcosm of it where you're like, oh, I'm just going to plan a few things out. You know, it's just systems talking to systems. They're going to have this here. Maybe it's directory structure even we're talking about. But then there's also like, oh no, but we're talking about like the CPU core architecture. That's also architecture, because it's like the deliberate planning of like where to break things out. But what's the point of it? Is it to make things more efficient? Is it to make is it for us? Is it to make our brains easier to, is it to deal with complexity and have it easier to understand? Is it all of the above? Is it sometimes like, yeah, this architecture has different goals than this other architecture? I guess I think it does when I say it out loud like that, because I do think some architectures are specifically for keep dealing with complexity, whereas others are about performance, and some are about like, oh, hey, this architecture allows us to do something differently.
Yeah, different architectures would definitely have different goals for sure.
Like, some architecture is just to piss people off.
Right. I mean, well, you look at the architecture of like Angular Core or something. I've looked at that, and it has these goals around like, you know, performance and very wildly different goals than you would have for like an application architecture for some CRUD app that people were putting together, or like then there's data visualization apps or whatever that would have, again, slightly different architectural goals, just depending on, maybe you need to put together a whole bunch of different charts. Maybe you just need one that performs really well. Like, so yeah, I think it's all, architectures are by and large like purpose built for different things. And I think, I don't know if we're going to explore this in the podcast, but I would be fascinated to figure out if we could actually figure out a way to quantify like all of the many situations where people come up with architectures and have no idea that they're even building an architecture. I think a lot of architecture is just oops, or I learned a pattern and then I applied that pattern over and over and over again and it became an architecture.
Oops, I built a state management library.
That is a fascinating subject. The idea of accidental architecture, you could call it emergent architecture.
I mean, isn't it what everything is though? Isn't everything accidental architecture?
I don't think so. I would say architecture in by its essence is deliberate. It's like, I am going to plan this, and I do, and it might not be the right.
Well, like if you're building an app and you don't even know. I mean, I guess everything is architecture, right? It's like, oh, this is how I'm going to structure my components. Here's how I'm going to like. You know.
Now you've gone too far if you say everything's architecture. Everything is architecture.
What do you think, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, the like tuna casserole that I make tonight is not architecture. So, and it's not an everything bagel. I think architecture is too nebulous of a word when you're talking about it. Like Ben rattled off CPU architecture of the instruction set for assembly. Meanwhile, like I think of architecture as like a broadly scoped idea of a program from start to finish to sort of get to the product goals. Like from the work that we do day in and day out, it's very product oriented. Like CPU design and memory allocation, not really on my architectural map very often. There are certainly niches where like little niche places where that comes into, but for the most part, like organic architecture where people are just building an app and be like, oh, this delegate pattern works super well here. They don't even know what a delegate pattern is. They just know that like I can pass these things around and like that works out great. And it works. Like when it works, people just move on. I think deliberate is the word that might be more important, is deliberate architecture, in the sense of like we have these set of goals and this is our rough plan to get there, whether it's performance or CPUs or browser implementation or core library goals. But you've got a set of goals and you've got like essentially a deliberate plan, and that plan's going to change, but you've got at least the starts of a plan.
Right. I mean, I think you're touching on an important bit that is a defining feature of architecture is not execution. Architecture is like guidelines or a design or a blueprint for execution, right? Like there's not like, it's not like that's what I think makes it a little bit hard to discuss, because it's not super like a tangible thing other than a design or like a given framework or set of tools for people to use. But even the set of tools is not the architecture. The architecture is what the set of tools were made to support, right? So.
Well, what about when people are like, oh man, we really need an architect? Like,
yeah, what do they mean by that?
Yeah, what do they want?
Right.
Hi,
Well,
architect.
I mean, I can tell you like my job as an architect is pretty much like coming up. So you're looking at the constraints that are coming from the business, like what do they need? What are they asking for? Gathering information about requirements about what they actually probably need, and then thinking about, what pieces do we have in place to reuse to do some of this stuff? What do we need that's new? And then coming up with a design around like, how are we going to put this thing together? Like what sort of backend services do we need? What sort of backend services are available? What can we leverage? What like is it? Where are we deploying?
Like hot trash fire messes and being like, oh God, all this legacy code. How do I reuse it in a way because I have to, because it's cheaper than building it from scratch?
I mean, if you can, yeah. There's
That's what I think Ben's job is. Did you guys hear that, or was that just me?
I mean, I wrote some legacy code this morning, and it worked out just fine.
But you're right. It's all about constraints.
Is it legacy if you just read it right now, though?
Yeah, it's the direct to legacy market. Like it's
always legacy.
It's like being released immediately on DVD. It's kind of
straight to DVD.
Straight to DVD. Good thing. But yeah, no, it's about dealing with your constraints and trying to achieve your goals, right? It's designing to that fashion. But why did we call it an architect? Because I feel like this is like the major problem. Maybe one of the problems with our industry is like people have this image of how an architect works and they relate it to construction, and they're like, okay, so people are going to come in, they're going to hire the architect, she's going to make us a blueprint, give us the blueprint, and then walk away. And that just doesn't work. Right?
Yeah. So like, that's a little bit of what I do, weirdly. So we got this team of folks, and they come up with the design, and then like you babysit it a little bit, but if you design it well enough, then hopefully they execute on it, and you can, that way, like the idea is to take somebody with a perhaps a more senior mindset or a more like deeper skill set, and have them provide guidelines for other people to follow, so like larger teams can execute on something. So it's not just like me sitting there by myself doing all this stuff from in my head. If I can write the whole plan out and spread that work amongst a whole bunch of other people, then
it sounds like just a process of best practices is what an architect does.
To some degree, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's a bit like, you've got other people that have to babysit the process of execution, right? Like you have other like team leads or tech leads or whatever that need to go through and do code reviews, and architects are part of that group. right? And then, but like the actual plan and like requirements gathering and working with the product teams and that sort of stuff, that all comes through and architecture, a group of people responsible for architecture. If it's not just an architect, maybe it's a few leads that are all working together because we got like back end expertise or front end expertise or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
I think the name, the reason for the naming is not a great, like, it hasn't always been called architect. It needed to be something to delineate it from individual contributors, from design team, from product owners, from management. Like, the intersection of architecture basically sits in the middle of all of these and like does the processing from like, because product owners know what they want. They have no idea what they want, but they have problems, and like getting the problems out of their out and actually into tangible form is itself a known skill. But that's not development, right? So what do you call that? Working with design team.
Product owners know.
Product owners know exactly. I work with. Yeah. God, I want this thing.
Product owners know exactly what they want, though, right? Like,
I don't know what I want.
Yeah, product owners know what they want because the users told them so.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, so like, here's the thing. Like, I don't know if y'all remember this, but like a long time ago when I first started doing this, like they were slapping the words like software architect onto like everybody. Like I got this job. I was like I bet it was 22, and I had this consulting job. And they're like, yeah, he's a software architect, or like they had junior software architects, senior software architects. Like, so it was like this big thing in consulting, like everyone was a software architect. And like now it's like software engineer. And like, I don't know, like is some of the stuff I did during my career, I was a coder. I wasn't really engineering very much. Like I'd get a Jira ticket in and I'd be like, oh, this crap needs to be blue. And I'd go in and change it blue, and ta-da, like, great. But like the architect thing, I really do think the architect role, if you wanted to call it like a single role as an architect, is really is like design something such that a larger group of engineers can execute on it, right? Like, so like, is that role a necessity at every company? No, absolutely not. There's some companies that have like 4 or 5 engineers that can all work together, or even a dozen engineers that can all work together. They don't need an architect to come in and do that. And occasionally people will rotate and take that position of, okay, me and this person over here, we're going to work on designing this thing and putting it together. And in that time period, they're the architects of the thing.
It's usually in groups that size, it's broken up by feature, like who's going to start this feature and work on this feature. And they'll usually pair up based on seniority or availability or bandwidth.
Give me a small feature so I can architect it. I'm here. I'm ready. But what about all these other, like, these like architectural patterns, like actor model or microservices or monoliths or broker, like, why is there so many? And like, what about those people who are just like, because you guys hear it, right? It's like, ooh, microservices. We got to move to microservices.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah. And I think it's just because different things work well in different applications, right? Like, so people get, but for example, we'll just take observables in ArcGIS, for example. People get really excited about it because they like the reactivity and like linking things together like Legos and stuff like that. And then there will be somebody like, you know what? I'm going to use this to write a video game with, Canvas or something. And that's great. It's fine if that works for them. But like, honestly, then like, this comes from the guy that works in the library. Like, I probably would just have a render loop that just like did things in the render loop. There'd be a simple, like, here's a request animation frame render loop, and that's my architecture. Like, I don't really need this other bit of stuff. And maybe at some point I decide I'm going to use some of that for like, stream coordination or something. But like the thing is there's 2 different architectures there. They're both good at very different things. And like, so you kind of pick and choose which one of those things it's going to be better for a given application, right?
I think if you look at like the overlap of all the things that a design and UX team would do to what an architecture do, but you think of the user as the developers, right? So you're trying to give a good user experience to these developers, call it developer experience, call it whatever, but they have problems that they want to solve. And, as developers, we're like, oh, I want to make it do this. I want to make my program do this. And then the architect's like, okay, well, here's some patterns that we've figured out help you do that. And it's just like, design UX. It's like, yeah, here's some patterns that have been successful in the field, people are familiar with, and that people have gotten used to. And these are some innovative new patterns. And we cobble them together. And now we call it, a design. But in architect's case, we call it an architecture. So like design patterns of code kind of just fit in there, right? It's just like a tool that an architect can use to architect their app in a certain way so that the systems all have certain relationships and stuff. And then it's recognizable. It's people like, oh, I'm familiar with that. I know how that works, and they can reuse it and use it again and stuff like that. I think that's how design patterns fit into architecture, right? Just like UI patterns fit into web design or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I think you get a lot of them because you have a lot of problems. And at a certain point, you realize that everything can't be a hammer. So you need to try several. Well, I mean,
anything could be a hammer.
You picked maybe the wrong tool for that. Everything.
That's
everything you can use to smack something else can be a hammer.
Yeah, that analogy didn't really
eggs
get me.
do make terrible hammers.
Yeah, there you go. But
Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say. So you've got, we've managed to create such a breadth of technology that there are so many more problems to solve than there are good ways to solve them. And so you get this laundry list of possible patterns that hopefully we'll cover here in future episodes, picking out bits and pieces. The hexagonal pattern and other random stuff that you have probably used and never heard of.
Yeah, there's a lot of funky peer-to-peer pipe and filter.
Right? We could just make up a name and people are like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that.
The Apple
Message
Orange
broker, naked objects.
Sure. Everybody's familiar with naked objects.
Are you familiar with the naked objects?
That's what happens when you go to too many Six
architecture?
Flags and stay up too late. You end up in naked objects.
That's true. This is what
Well,
happens.
yeah, we are
going
going
to
to be
explore
talking.
them.
Yeah,
We're
we
gonna-
are.
We're gonna take it on from like a front end focused JavaScripty kind of angle though, because that's where our head is at right now.
Yeah, stay tuned for like micro front ends, event driven architecture, actor model stuff, activity stuff. But we always have to end this episode or these podcasts with like a question. So I'm going to ask a question and you guys have to answer me truthfully, okay? Would you rather
Never would I ever.
Would you rather, never would I ever, is that better? Would you rather take hot chilies and rub them all over your face or go jump roping on a cactus?
On a cactus?
On a cactus.
I feel like the hot chilies is like less permanent damage. So I guess if I would have to go there.
I have to rub them all over my face, like
Yeah.
in my eyes.
All over your face.
Yeah, tough choice, but I think I'm gonna go with the chilies.
This is a really hard. This is like a Google architecture interview already. I can tell.
Mhm. Well, let's break it down. Okay, so
Really
the problems
telling you a
are.
lot. Yes. Telling me a lot about your choices in life.
Let's start to make a list. Okay, so there's going to maybe be an allergic reaction. There's going to be some burning in the face, possible permanent redness, and let's face it, it might wreck your beautiful face for a little while. You might have to wear excessive makeup or have a heavy filter on for a while, so there'll be inconvenience. But if you fall on a cactus, it's going to hurt a lot.
There's going to be blood.
There's going to be blood, probably lots, in bad places if you fall the wrong way. And so I just think the possibility, like on the risk, it just gets so high when you think about like falling badly, of like awful.
Well, you're jumping
permanent,
on a cactus.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm
Like,
starting to feel
Just
sick.
the
No, yeah.
once.
It's just
Where did this question like? Where did
the
this
needles
question
could
come
just
from?
pierce the worst of places, and oh, they would be there.
We were
Well,
talking
then
about architecture and it was inspiring me to talk about cactuses and hot chili
No,
peppers.
definitely the chilies. The chilies are.
And then
are
you
way,
have to get
way
the
ahead
cactus
on this
needles
one.
removed, which is
Oh, I know.
equally as
Embarrassing
painful.
and painful and just
So
awful.
Jesse, you picked the chilies?
Yeah, as someone who lives in the desert, I do not want any more cactus things near me.
All right, so everyone, next episode, we will be rubbing hot chilies all over our faces. Stay tuned. But yeah, stay tuned for the next one. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you have fun with us.